All right, howdy bot builders. How are we doing? Happy Tuesday. I hope it's a good morning or evening or good afternoon, depending on where it is in the world where you're joining us from. Yes, thank you, Sabrina, for speaking up. That's much appreciated. Um, all right. Well, I suppose I can, let's take to this. I'm going to begin today's stream by catching up on some questions that I see from chat. Dark Age asks about an example of a live search feature. Yeah, we can talk about searching the web. One thing I'll say is that I show a couple of examples of this in videos on our YouTube channel, both on previous live streams and in certain videos. But also, we can just go over that here as well, no problem. And then Double A says coffee with pumpkin spice. No, I'm already 3.5 coffees in from today, so I swapped over to tea, which is equally caffeinated, and yet here we are. Okay, let me share you. I'll share with all of you what I've got planned for today's stream, and then, as usual, what I want to say off the top is that if you've got questions or things you want me to go over about Botpress, please feel free. You are highly encouraged, nay, you are urged to interrupt my stream and ask me questions. That is exactly what we're here for. So. Yes, lots of news coming from Dev Day. I'm probably not going to touch on them just because I want to keep this bot building focused. But there's lots of exciting stuff coming out of there. Cheaper GPT-4 is always exciting. Lots of interesting changes to the API, which is you'll see. But let's talk about software more generally. So my originally for this week I had something completely different planned, and what I had wanted to do was just build on last week's live stream where we went over the AI task and conversational memory, but none of it felt right, and it felt maybe like it was more dedicated, would have been better dedicated to a standalone video. And as the week progressed last week, one of the things that I was tasked with at Botpress, outside of bot building anyways, was to plan the holiday party. This is one of my responsibilities here that I'm currently doing. And so if you've ever planned a party, one of the things that you know is you're dealing with a lot of information and a lot of typically you might do this like through a spreadsheet, but you're collecting information from people and you're storing that information somewhere, and then you're making decisions based on the data that you're collecting. And so as the week progressed last week, I was ruminating on what tool to use. Should I use a Typeform? Should I use a spreadsheet to collect information from everybody? And then of course it dawned on me that I had the tool right in front of me. In fact, it was the very tool that we build here. And I wondered if there was a way that I could use a chatbot in order to help me plan this the holiday party. So the purpose of today's live stream that I'll run all of you through is a real life example of me using Botpress out in the real world, just because it was genuinely the best tool to use. I mean, I think the options that I had evaluated were things like a Typeform where I was collecting information from people, a Google form, of course. I'm sure you're all familiar with Google Forms, but those left something to be desired in the user experience, let's say, both because I want to collect the data, look at the data after, and do something different with it, but then also they're not like super delightful experiences, right? And so we are certainly in the business of providing delightful experiences to people that chat with our bots. So from start to finish today, we'll go over this kind of party planner bot that I had that I cooked up for our Botpress holiday party and show you all how to do that. But Dark Age, if you're here, I think what I'll begin with is I'll just show you what I would do in order to search the web using a knowledge base, and then we can go from there. So really the basic workflow here is just to set up a node with knowledge answering enabled, use a raw input card, capture the user's question. So you might say something like, what is your question? And then have it search that knowledge base. Of course, we'll need a knowledge base for this. And so as the knowledge base source, we'll just search the entire web. And that should work correctly. So why don't we give this a shot? Over here in the emulator, I'll say hi, get prompted for my question. And I'll say the usual example I give is who is Jane Fonda? I think search entire web not working like Bing or Google search. I mean, it's who knows? So it seems to be working for me here. You can see here I've got answers and references. So if you're running into problems, it might be a problem with how you've designed your chatbot or a host of other things, but it doesn't look like it's a problem on the Botpress side. I would say maybe post a picture of your workflow over in help, and then we can maybe help you diagnose the actual cause of the problem, because otherwise the usual flow seems to be working as expected. Okie dokie. All right, so let's talk about party planning. Let's talk about building a bot for a real world use case. I think there's been a lot of particularly if you watched perhaps yesterday's OpenAI announcements. There's been a lot of talk about building chatbots, and that's really exciting. And so one of the things I wanted to show here was how you might deploy a chatbot in a real world setting for a thing that is actually useful. And so I think there's a lot of talk of, revenue sharing and sharing apps on a marketplace. But of course, as we all know, what we need is something useful. What we need is something that's going to help us be productive in our day-to-day lives. And so this is where this kind of party planner bot came to be, because I genuinely needed this tool in order to plan the Botpress holiday party, which will be occurring over the holiday season. So let's, if you've built a bot with me before, a lot of this should be pretty familiar by now, just opening with a greeting, et cetera, et cetera. If you're curious about my bot building process and kind of my best tips, there are other videos on the Botpress YouTube channel and whatnot that outline kind of step-by-step how I generally go about these things. If you're watching this recording in the future, I would recommend maybe give those a start first to watch and then come back here and see how I go live. Or not. It's your life. Life is terribly short and also unbearably and insufferably long, so you can spend your time as you would like to. Ours is not to reason why. All right. So I'm going to start with a greeting and just send a simple text card here. And I'll just say, welcome to the party planner. I will say for my Botpress colleagues, I put something more fun in these welcome messages, but I'll keep it a bit bland just for the sake of this demonstration. One thing I want to say off the top here is I've seen some people do some really cool things with generating unique images using, for example, like the DALL-E API. So if that's something, if you wanted to generate a unique image for each person who spoke with your bot, you could do that as well. That's outside my scope. So there's if you're like a medical doctor, there's something called scope of practice. And so if you're like if you're a gastroenterologist, you wouldn't be performing brain surgery. And so I'm not going to be doing that here because that's outside my scope of practice. But just know that that's, if you wanted to level up, that was certainly something you could do. And so what do I want to happen next? So what I want to collect some pieces of information from the people that chat with my bot, of course, and I want to provide them with a delightful experience. So those are the two things that I'm going to be keeping in mind this whole time. Now, the first thing I want to note off the top is collecting information. So having a conversation with the bot usually takes about a couple of minutes between collecting my answer, if I'm the person chatting with my bot, reading the messages that they send to me, so on and so forth. And that's not always, you don't always have a couple of minutes. Maybe you're about to hop on a call. So the first thing I do when I'm designing a bot like this for the real world is allow my user to just pop out, to just say, I'm not ready yet. For instance, I would just use a single choice card here, and I'll just say something like, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Do you have a couple of minutes? And then we'll just provide some choices, yes or no, and depending on what they choose, we'll send them down a different conversational path. If they choose no, I'll just end the conversation and I'll say, come back later. And if they choose yes, then we'll begin the conversation, of course. The purpose for this is we don't want anyone to feel like a bot is doing something that's completely out of their control, or they don't really understand what's happening or why that happened. Red says, is it possible to create a bot for WhatsApp that only authorized numbers can interact with? If so, how difficult is it? You ask a good question. I'm actually not sure if you can do any kind of validation there. There's probably a few different workarounds that you can do on the Botpress side of things. So for example, you can check a number or a user's name, or depending on what service you're using, like their first name. You could check that against a database of authorized users and go from there. Or alternatively, you could do that specifically on the WhatsApp side. I will say that's outside the scope of what I'm going to be doing today. But it's a good question, Red. I would love to know the answer to this. All right. So we continue on. And now this is the meat and potatoes. So maybe I'll just call this node meat and potatoes. And I'll say, this is where I'm going to be asking them some questions. So what are the things that I needed to know from the Botpress side of things? As the party planner here, of course, the first thing I needed to know was, will you be attending the holiday party? Will you be coming with a +1? I will not be. But I think I'm big enough for 3 people. I have enough personality for 3 people that I think it's like I'm bringing a +2 anyways. Junior Dev says, my bot is not playing the short video after I styled it. Advice what could be an issue that only happens when the share tab is open, but in the emulator, all is good. Are you junior dev? Are you sharing this via the shareable widget? Is this deployed on your website? And this only occurred after you styled it, correct? So you implemented a style sheet. I would first, to troubleshoot and try and isolate the issue, if you're using a style sheet, maybe remove the style sheet and see if it can play, if the video plays otherwise there, because it might be just a front-end thing or a visual bug. So give that a try. If the problem persists, I would say provide some more details and post over and help. So it's deployed on your website. So try removing the style sheet, see what happens. If it's not a problem with the style sheet, then we can remove that variable and then go from there. But more details would be helpful over in the channel that Sabrina just linked. All right, so will they be attending the Botpress holiday party? I'm going to store this in a variable called isAttending. You'll see I'm using camel case there, and we'll be capturing a Boolean variable. Let's talk a bit about conversation design, because this was actually a mistake that I had made when I originally designed this bot that I've since fixed, but is not ideal. So let's say I'm a user chatting with this bot, and they're not coming to the holiday party. Of course, there's no relevance in them responding to the rest of the questions, and so they should be able to, once again, pull the ripcord here. So at this no stage, if they respond no, they should just receive a personalized message, something like, I'm sorry to hear you won't be joining us, maybe next year. Because, of course, the answers that they provide to the rest of the questions are irrelevant if they cannot come. If they do join, if they are able to join, if they are planning on coming, I want them to answer the question. So I'll remove the path from here. And so the only response that will send them down a different conversational path is going to be this no card. Okay. Hello is attending. I had already created this as a string variable. Get out of here. Delete. All right, that's my first question. Are they attending? Yes or no? My next question is probably going to be something like, will you be bringing a +1? Because that's related to attendance, let's say. So are you bringing a +1? We'll continue building this. I'm going to remove these paths, and I'll save this in a variable called +1. And so let's recap and talk about where we are now. So as my user is chatting with this bot, they're going to begin getting asked some questions, and we've now collected 2 Boolean variables. Are they coming? Yes or no? And are you going to bring a +1? Yes or no? Some other things I wanted to note were, do you have any dietary requirements? Of course, if you've ever party planned anything, you'll know this is a big important one. And I'll just provide some examples. So for example, halal, kosher, vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, other, let me know. And let's talk a bit about the single choice card here. So by default, you will be prompted to create some paths outside of this flow, but we want to remove those and we don't want them. So we just click the path icon here and it'll just remove those. So it goes from blue to gray, and then those paths don't exist anymore. And now we can just save this information as a variable. So here, I'll save this in the variable diet requirements, and we save it there. And we can continue on. Let's take a pause for a second for me to have a brief aside, as I normally do, and talk about, yeah, so that should be multi-choice since people could have multiple. That's actually true. For the purpose of the example, I think I put single choice, but in any case, here, I'll save this as dietary recs. So let's continue talking about this for example, before we continue on with the process of building this bot. So one thing that I think is important to note here is if you're using like a type form for this, for example, the conversational experience both is there and isn't there. And this amounts to the same thing, but the beauty of doing it this way is you can make changes on the fly. And then equally, you can embed this on like an employee portal. So you can also deploy this on Slack, for instance. You can add like a party planner add-on, and you can just pop this onto your Slack and have people chat with it there. So the beauty of being able to deploy these in other places is, I think, a big plus. All right, let's keep going. What is one thing that I didn't ask at the right at the beginning that I should have? Of course, that's going to be their name. Also, if you're on the Botpress team and you're watching this and you filled out the holiday party chatbot conversation and you indicated that your first name was just the letter B, can you please write me an email? Because I don't know who you are. And there's only one person at the company whose name starts with a B, and it wasn't that person. And so I truly have no idea who this could be. So if that's you and you're watching this, please just let me know. But in any case, here, I'll just start by saying, what is your name? And I'll save this as a username. All right, let us continue. Another variable that I need to collect is, will you be needing a hotel for the night, of course. So on the original version of this, I hadn't included any of the yes or no's. But one of the things that I did want to note here is you could also, if they did need a hotel room for the night, you could, for example, send them down a different path, ask them what days they needed, and then continue the conversation accordingly. But I'm not going to go ahead and do that because I'm just going to assume they just need it for the one night, of course, the night of the holiday party. And that's something you can clarify elsewhere. Narakara asks, is there an easy way to allow people to correct their previous answers? I mean, is there an easy way to do that? I think the way that I would suggest, if they accidentally hit B, they can go back and fix. The way that I would do this is at either, you could do validation on each card. So for example, here in the choices under advanced configuration, validation is an option. The next thing you could do is at the very end of the conversation, so right when the user is finished asking all of their, they've been asked all their questions, you can show them all the responses that they've given you. And if any of those are not correct, you can go back and restart the conversation. I realize that I don't know if that qualifies as easy, but that's how I might do this. Either one of those two validation steps is how I would go about correcting their previous answers. Dum-da-da-dum. All right. If we can continue on, needs hotel. And then the last thing I gave was just an option to, do you have any other comments about your reservation? So right now, all this bot does is just collects this information, doesn't store it anywhere, so I'm going to need to add that, and it doesn't provide my user the ability to ask any questions. So let's fix that as well. What I'm going to do here, of course, if I want to give my bot some knowledge, let it ask some questions, I'm going to add a knowledge base, and I'll just pop a simple text document in. I'll say the Botpress holiday party will happen on December 14th. And maybe I'll just begin with this one piece of information and go from there. You could, of course, upload the PDF or whatever information makes sense for you. I'll name this holiday party info just so my workspace stays organized. And the idea here is we'd like to continue adding onto it as time goes on. Asking at every step, I mean, validation is kind of annoying because it's like, you put this, did you mean to put this? Whereas you could just recap at the end using the variables that you store the information as. So we collect this information. Of course, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to store this information somewhere. So if I'm talking about storing information, if I'm talking about collecting information, you should have some alarm bells going off, and that should indicate to you we'd love to use a table for this. It's probably my favorite feature in Botpress is the tables, because I can just store information here. And I don't need to use a spreadsheet, which are fine, but, Can you export this to a CRM? Mac, you ask a great question. So actually, on the topic of tables, that's exactly the right call. So let me walk you through what would happen there. What I'm expecting, and this is what I did earlier this week, is that a group of users will fill in this information. So they're going to have a conversation with my bot, collect all the information here. I want to store that information in this table, and then you can export this information in the table as a CSV. And you can upload that CSV into whatever CRM or data organizing or visualization tool that you're using. So the idea here is you have this information stored in a Botpress table, and you could just send it out as and when you need. And so let's talk about what variables we want to save in this table. Let me make sure I have these set up properly. Yes. Okay. So a couple of pieces of information. The first thing I want is attending ? And then hotel ? These are all those Boolean variables that we set earlier. And so let's talk a bit about what I'm doing. So here, what I'm showing you is I'm creating some of these columns to store this information. Are they attending? Yes or no, checkbox. Do they need a hotel? Yes or no, checkbox. Dietary requirements here. And then +1. Here, I'll just do that +1 like this. And of course, I'll save that as a Boolean variable again. And then maybe actually the first one I should have put was name, because that's going to be the most relevant. But let me reorder this. All right. Ooh, Dark Age asks a very long question. As a result, they may exit the process and return. Is there a way to allow users to freely ask questions or seek information while still remaining the option to complete their purchase at a later time? I'd like to explore the feasibility of implementing a shopping cart feature that enables this flexibility. So that depends on what shopping service you're using. For example, like, are you using is the chatbot deployed on a Shopify store? What you're describing would require you to connect the chatbot to the API of whatever e-commerce service you or your client is using. So I would begin by urging you to look at what does the API on the e-commerce side expose, and what are you able to build from there, and go on. Of course, the chatbot can't make any purchases without connecting to the API of whatever e-commerce service you're using. So that's the answer to that question. Although I'm sure that will just engender more questions, but here we are. All right, so we have the tables for storing this information. The next thing I want to do is, once my user has finished having this conversation with the bot, of course, I want to create a new record, so a new line item in that table, using this information here as kind of a guide. So of course, I'm going to use an insert record card. What this will do is says to my bot, all right, now that you've collected this information, take this information and pop it into a new line item or record or row in the spreadsheet in that Botpress table that we just created. Of course, I'm going to do holiday party table. And I'm going to select some of these variables. So attending, at workflow is attending. Hotel is going to be the variable that indicates whether they need a hotel or not. +1 is going to be the variable indicating if they're bringing a +1 or not. This is going to be their name. And we'll leave dietary requirements for a sec, because I think one thing we need to acknowledge here is the reason I didn't set this up as an array is because your table a cell will not support individual arrays. How can I explain this? A user might have multiple dietary requirements, but the limitation of the chatbot is such that we need them to pick one in order to store it in a table. In practice, this doesn't pose too much of a problem because I'm allowing them to provide any other comments here. So if someone's saying like, I'm halal, but then I'm also vegan, they can indicate both of those items here. But that's just a little note on why I had originally set up the chatbot in that way. So let us go here and just swap this over to a string variable. There's probably a more elegant way to do this, but for now, I will continue this way. All right, let's make sure that insert record card is set up properly. And then there are a couple of more things I want to do before we can call this bot like a V1 draft that we might think of as complete. So let's navigate over to a new node. And here, I'm going to ask them if they have any more questions. This is kind of a classic one. And this is where that knowledge base is going to come in. So the reason I'm using a new node here is because I want to enable knowledge answering on this node and allow my user to ask a question. Actually, I'm going to send them there using a single choice card instead of sending them right away. So here is where I'll say, do you have any additional questions? This one I'm not going to save to a variable because just for sending them down a path, yes or no. If the answer is no, I'll end the conversation. And if the answer is yes, then I'm going to pop them here. And of course, this is where I'll put a raw input card and I'll say, sure, I can help you out. What's your question? And ideally, this is where they'll be able to get answers to questions like, how do I book a hotel? Or where is the party happening? Or what date is it happening on? And so that's where that knowledge base is going to come in handy. And so I want to account for one of two situations here. Was my bot able to answer, yes or no? And so I'm going to use an expression for this. This should be familiar to, if you're like a Botpress mainstay, this should be familiar to you. If it's not, what I would recommend is check out a few of our other videos on answering questions from knowledge bases, how to handle if your bot doesn't have an answer from a knowledge base, for instance, what to do in that case. That's what's going on here. We're just accounting for whether my user is able to receive a response from my bot. So here I'll call this one no answer, and I'll just use the turn.knowledgeagent.responded variable. And then if they didn't get a response, this is what I'm going to do, and this is the fun bit. I'm actually going to go ahead and create a second table, and I'll call this one unanswered questions. Why am I doing this? What's the point of this? As a party planner, I need to know what kinds of questions my people are having and what kind of questions they're not receiving answers to, so that I can maybe go and improve the knowledge base and minimize the amount of emails that are sent to me. Of course, I have no way of knowing what those questions are. I mean, I suppose I could go through the conversation history, but that's a tedious process and it's a waste of my time, and there's obviously a better way to do these things. So what I'm going to do here is in the unanswered questions table, all I'm going to do is save a column for the question itself. And then if they didn't receive an answer to the question over here, so when they ask a question here to this raw input card, they don't receive an answer, I want my bot to store that answer. I want my bot to say, okay, this is the list of questions that I didn't have an answer to that maybe you should probably fix. To do that, of course, we're going to have to save this to a variable. So I'll save this to more question. And here I'll use another insert record card for the unanswered questions table. And that I'm going to save is the more question variable. Let's talk about what's going to happen here. So what's going to happen is my bot will take this question. If they can answer it, great, no problem, that's done. If they can't answer it, then they're going to get sent over here to the insert record card. And I'll send them a little text here that says something like, sorry, I can't answer that. I've made a note of your question, and Robert will follow up ASAP. So now they know what's happening. My user is aware that my bot wasn't able to answer that question. Junior Dev asks, is there a way to get choice records like yes or no choices the users make? What do you mean by this question, Junior Dev? Can you give me maybe some more details or an example? So here, and then I'll send them back, or maybe I'll allow them to pick if they want to get sent back. And I'll say, do you want to ask another question? And of course, the choices will be yes or no. If the answer is yes, then of course I'll just send them back over here. And if the answer is no, then I'll end the conversation like I did before. And one last thing I need to do is, let's say they do get an answer to their question here. So they ask one more question, they receive an answer. So this expression transition doesn't trigger. I'm going to take this port here and pop it back over to the beginning. And this is where they're able to say, I can help you out. Or actually, not this one, but I'm going to send them to, anyway, somewhere else. Let's test this out. All right, so I think before we test this out, there comes a point at every bot building project where it's useful to zoom out completely, get an overview of what you've built, and then see from there. So let's zoom out completely to this place that is kind of hard to see, and then understand what it was that we built. So over here, the first thing that happens is my user is greeted and appreciate what you've built. Look at my empire. So my user is greeted, and then they're asked, do they have time to answer a couple of questions? If they do, then they move over to the meat and potatoes node, where they go through and they get asked a series of questions that then get stored into a table like this, and then they get asked if they have additional questions. I think one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to separate the additional questions card from this meat and potatoes node. I'm going to pop it in its own, just because I want to be able to point users to this one specifically. So I'll just move that down here like this. And then if my user does receive an answer to this question, I can point them over here again. So now, once that they've created their row in their spreadsheet, they get asked, do they have more questions? If they do, they can enter this kind of question asking loop, and then we can save their unanswered questions here. Of course, I think the best way to visualize this is just to test it out. So once we've appreciated our hard work, I'll say hi, and we'll go from there. Do I have a couple of minutes? Yes, I do. What is my name? Here, I'll just say Robert Soup, as usual. Will you be attending the holiday party? I don't like that there's no question mark there. So let me fix that. And we keep going back to building. Yes, I will be, of course. Am I bringing a +1? No. Like we established earlier, I am enough for 3 people. Do I have any dietary recs? I'm going to say, just for the purpose of the example, I'm vegan. Will you be needing a hotel room for the night? No, I live in the city. Do we have any other comments about your reservation? I want to have fun. Do you have any additional questions? Yeah, I do. And so now we're over here. What's my question? What color is the fish? I'm asking this question because I don't think that my bot has the answer to it, of course, and I want to see what happens there. I see. Answer was found in knowledge base. So something is going wrong here, and my bot is answering a question despite the fact that I don't have that answer somewhere. Do I have any additional questions? No. All right, so let's debug here. Let's see what happened. The first thing is that there should be no question here in the unanswered questions table, which is correct. And then in the holiday party table, we should see a record reflecting Robert Soup. And so you can see here, my answers were correctly logged, no +1, vegan, hotel, etc. But let's see what's going on with this kind of knowledge-based situation, because I don't love that I received an answer anyways. Here we have the culprit. So if you watched from the beginning of the stream, if you're just tuning in now, hi. If you watched from the beginning of the stream, I included an example of a web search knowledge base. And so what happened there was my bot was searching the web and provided my user with a nice answer about the color of a fish, but that's not what I want. So I'm going to delete this knowledge base, and we'll try that one more time. Let's fill it out on behalf of a different person. And I'll say, hi, this person is going to be green stew. Do I have a couple of minutes? Yeah, I do. No problem. All right, my name is Green Stew. Will I be attending the holiday party? Yes. Bringing a +1? No. Do you have any dietary requirements? Green Stew is a pescatarian. They won't be needing a hotel room. They're also local. And then they also love having fun. Do I have any additional questions? Yes. And this person also wants to know what color the fish is. What color is the fish? I don't know. In my mind, a fish is like a weird blue-green color. But I don't want to ask another question. All right, so we should see here, yeah. So now the what color is the fish pops up on my unanswered questions table. And so now what we've ended up with is a record of who's coming to the party, what their specific needs are, and then what questions they have that they didn't get answers to. In the real world, perhaps for this example, in my holiday party info spreadsheet, I would be able to put something like the fish is red in color. So now as the owner of the bot, I can see my users are asking this question, and so I'll just put that information in my knowledge base because that's what they're asking. All right. So this was the bot that I built last week, essentially. I mean, I made it a bit more delightful and fun for my colleagues, but this is kind of the skeleton version of it. I think maybe for the last couple of minutes of stream, as usual, at the end of these streams, I ask all of you if there are questions that you have that you burningly want an answer to. You've got a burning question in your chest, let it out now or forever hold your bot building peace, as we say. But while you're all thinking of your questions, I'm just going to talk a bit about why we would build a party planner this way. I think the first is the example that we just saw. You can collect this information in a spreadsheet. You can collect this information via something like a type form or another kind of fillable form service, but your user won't be able to ask questions. So what I want to do as the person in charge of planning this is minimize the amount of questions I get asked, not because I don't want to be helpful, but because it would be helpful for everyone for them to get that answer as quickly as possible. The next thing is we already talked a bit about providing delightful experiences, and I think that forms can also be delightful. But the user experience of filling out a form, so in this case, like I'm thinking of if I just sent around a spreadsheet and asked people to click in whether or not they needed a +1 or not. I mean, I've done this before. I've planned many a party in my heyday. But what tends to happen for spreadsheets like that is people get overwhelmed at the amount of information, and then the spreadsheet, the data tends to be something like contaminated, or they fill it in improperly, and that's no fun. So having more control over the conversation that way is a plus for me, the party planner, who needs accurate information. Carolyn asks, does the scope of this session allow for a bit of find records probing? I'm having an issue with filters not being picked up. Oh no, we're back to this. Here, maybe I can, we'll just test something out based on the information that I have in that table. Here, let's give it a shot. Find records. I'll do the holiday party table. And the variable +1 is true. So I want to know who is going to be bringing a date, let's say. This is not going to look nice because it's going to be returning an array, but just for the purpose of testing. And this let's see if this works. Ooh, no valid answer. Hang on a sec. Undefined. Carolyn, is this the bug that you are running into? Let's see what's going on here. In the meantime, Mac says, can you set a trigger at the start conversation? Yeah, you can absolutely set a trigger at the start. I would just use the trigger card down here, something like conversation started, and then pop that into the beginning of the conversation instead of the start node. There are videos on that, on how to set up triggers on our YouTube channel. An update next week on when we can expect to see some of the new OpenAI features. Yeah, GPT Vision, a way for users to upload an image. That would be really nice. I agree, Narukeru. It would be really nice to provide an update like that. I hope that we can. Fingers crossed. We are as excited as you are to see these changes. And so then to start implementing them into Botpress would be great. Carolyn, I'm gonna say, can we post about this in help again? If this is the issue that you're running into, I'll do a bit more probing with the find records card, because this should be working. I can't explain why it's not. Otherwise, Yeah, so it's in the old thread. Okay, I'll come see you in that old thread over there. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed this kind of party planning session. I will be dutifully party planning and then also enjoying the party as well. I hope that all of you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you all in the next stream, or perhaps at Patrick's stream on Thursday. Bye, everyone. I hope you have a lovely week. Happy bot building.